Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are live right now on CannaBuzz. Shout out to the CannaBuzz community. You can join our community in the CannaBuzz app, in the App Store. Search CannaBuzz, or just go to cannabuzz.app in your web browser, and you can join our community. We'd love to see you over there. We're broadcasting every Sunday with great interviews, just like this one today that we have with Dr. Colin Bell. I'm going to get into an intro into Colin and everything that he's done, and we're going to be talking about today. But before I get too far into it, I need to give a couple shout outs to some great people out there in the audience today. Firstly, of course, the CannaBuzz supporters that make this show possible. With your support, of course, we keep this podcast rolling, and as well as the community. So please use the code New Year at checkout in CannaBuzz, and that'll give you half off your first month as our thank you for joining the community. And then I also need to give a shout out to TikiMadMan, TikiMadMan.com. We've got a couple great announcements today from them. First off, you can find Pablo's Cookies at Neptune Seed Bank and tikiseeds.com. And you can also get 50% off all Zephyr seeds at tikiseeds.com. So make sure to hit up tikiseeds.com for all your tiki genetics. He's got some great stuff over there, so make sure to hit that up. And of course, thanks for his support. Well, all right, so today we have Dr. Colin Bell. He's the inventor of MammothP. Many of you probably know him by that. He's the inventor of MammothP and co-founder of Growcentia. He has a PhD in soil science and years of experience in sustainable agriculture arena. He has made a name for himself in the cannabis industry as an expert in plant nutrition. You've heard him on many podcasts and YouTube shows in the past. He's been instrumental in developing and harnessing the power of nature by developing biological products that reduce or eliminate dependencies on conventional synthetic growing solutions. He's helping the cannabis industry grow in an environmentally sustainable, responsible way. We're super stoked to have him here. Welcome to the show, Dr. Colin Bell.
Sam, thank you very much, JR. Thank you so much for having me. It's fun to see both of you guys today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for joining us.
Dropping in and saying, hey, we're happy. We're really happy to have you on. We've got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. I think these are interesting times that a lot of the people in the industry are going through. And I think that you have a very unique perspective and unique insight on what it takes to be out there in the cannabis space.
Yeah.
So that being said, we always like to have our guests start out by letting us know how you kind of started your cannabis journey.
Well, my cannabis journey kind of started a long time ago, but more from a counterculture perspective. As a teen, I used to have half brothers that lived in Illinois, and they'd come over in the summers. I grew up in West Texas, where it was very banned, to say the very least, but I was part of the counterculture group that really supported cannabis. And so grew up just in that environment through my whole teens. And so just part of that. I wasn't really into the cultivation. I didn't know any growers that were really growing. My brothers, when they came down for the summer, they would always find some seeds and put them in pots and start plants. And then we'd hide them in the yard. So that's how, and then they'd have to go back to their mom. And, as the proper, I guess, back in the day, old brothers would, one's 7 years older, one's 9 years older than me. They would leave by saying, "These better not die." And I'd be like, "Okay, bye." I had no idea what I was doing. They always died. And so I was like, okay, crap. But, it was honestly part of my life in some form from a very early age, probably since I was about 10 years old.
Nice.
Yeah. To elaborate professionally, I probably started engaging officially in the cannabis industry around 2014 to 2015, when as a scientist, and I have a long professional journey where I kind of sought out interest through my whole life, but finally found a passion in soil microbiology and the power of microbes to grow plants. And ultimately, which we'll talk about, developing technology that helps grow plants, natural microbial technology. We found ourselves with a technology that would bring a lot of value to cannabis growers. And so I dove in very deep and was a adult at that time in my 40s and starting to carve out and understand how, as a scientist, I could take that technology and get it in the hands of growers. And that's where the real journey honestly starts that we're going to be talking about today is as a scientist, what did you do? And how did it lead to all this? It's been about 8 years since Mammoth was launched, interestingly enough.
Wow. Well, can you tell us a little bit about that educational journey that you went on, like in your college years? Like what kind of education went into getting you to the point where you could do all this cool stuff and you have this deep insight and appreciation for what's actually going on?
Thanks. I appreciate the question. It's a great question. It's a little bit of a involved question for me because I personally, just to be completely transparent, did not enjoy school. I didn't enjoy school through high school. I didn't enjoy college. I just didn't really find that passion. I did understand that there was I thought benefit in getting through college, and I kept on grinding it out and making it happen. I kind of got a business degree, a general studies degree focused mostly in business, ultimately for an undergraduate degree. I was one of the guys that was completely distracted and I just had a ton of interest, and none of them really expressed themselves when I was just sitting in the classroom listening to my teachers talk. But um, I was also the kind of guy that explored hands-on. I've always had a paying job since I was like 12 years old. So I'd work nonstop, even when I was going to school, having summer jobs or weekend and evening jobs. And so I was always just looking for that next thing that I was looking for that thing, my thing. And that was a very frustrating journey because I tried all these things and I would stick with it for a while. Then I'd realize it just wasn't for me. And so to answer your question, I think what led me to this path was a passion where I finally kept on trying and kept on trying and learning, exploring, and trying new things. And I found myself faced with the opportunity after getting an undergraduate degree and working for years in business and logistics and doing some sales stuff there, and just getting overly frustrated because, again, that wasn't something that was fulfilling me. I didn't go home just like dreaming about business and logistics at that time. I was very good at it and I learned a lot, but I had a friend, I left for a little while that position. I actually started a massage clinic and because I was into healing arts and I thought that was cool. That wore off pretty quick. And I had a climber friend that hooked me up with one of her professors in biology. And there was an immediate connection where I was in the field all the time. I was climbing and hiking and living in nature more than not, at least visiting it. And I was looking for a higher purpose. And this opportunity to start learning about soil and microbes and plant microbe interactions took me in the field where I could spend a lot of time in the field with a little bit of a higher purpose and start learning about these ecosystem services or science, the ecosystem science of microbiology. And it immediately connected with something that was just fascinating because it turned to be it's like this invisible power that facilitates all energy on Earth. And for me, that's just cool. It's like Star Wars cool. I was like, man, this is just like the Force, just like Star Wars. And so I immediately got attracted to it, and I just realized the first time that I was working with soil samples, I'll just tell this story. The passion is, I think, what drives us all. We have to find that thing, then we can really thrive at it. And I would just have a little jam box. I don't know if people understand what that is. Some people do a little boom box with the cassette tape in it. And we play those, and I was weighing soil, and you weigh hundreds of samples, and you do all these analysis and soil analysis. And I remember, and it's just laborious, and you're stuck in back and weighing soil so you can do stuff to them. So it's just, it's simple and probably really monotonous for most people. I remember almost wanting to cry. I was so happy. I was like, this shit's so cool. And I was just like holding back the tears all by myself, listening to music and just like, the truth is, I think I'd really finally realized I'd found something that fulfilled me. And with that energy and motivation, I just dove into learning everything I possibly could about it. And I was a very successful graduate student. I finished my PhD with many published papers. And I had a really interesting study that allowed me to learn a lot. And I surrounded myself with really smart people. So I was able to kind of glean from their experience and knowledge and develop everything I possibly could into, how I formed and developed as a research scientist when I ultimately took that next step and started thinking about making technologies, microbial technologies.
Which is interesting because at some point in your academic career, you were posed with a problem and you needed to come up with a solution for that problem. What was the kind of the problem you were trying to solve, and what was the kind of aha moment that you had in trying to create a solution for that?
Yeah, it was a really interesting kind of epiphany or aha moment, like you said, JR. After going to graduate school at Texas Tech University, uh, I thought that where I wanted to go was up to Colorado State University because all my academic heroes worked there. And I'd read all their papers, I cited them, and I used them for a lot of my research backing. And I found myself there working in that area and doing fundamental research for years. And I plugged in 2010 at the Natural Resource Ecology Lab there. And I just thought that was the dream. I had made it. This is exactly what I wanted out of my graduate career. And I did some other things before that. Worked at the Forest Service for a small stretch, and the USDA Agricultural Research Services for a small stretch as well. And year upon year, publishing papers, getting research funding to support these research projects. The purpose was always solving problems. But to get to your question, at some point, it was like about 4 years in, me and one of my peers and co-founders of Growcentia, we started realizing that we weren't solving problems. We were just making up problems and trying to find solutions for them. We were following our interests fundamentally, but the thing mean? Does that mean that what we're doing doesn't matter? And I answered my own question, kind of. For some reason, I thought that what we were doing in academia magically transformed or translated into helping people in the real world, which was the basis for all the science. When we realized that we had to take that action, what we did was start looking for problems that we thought we could solve with our academic expertise. And what we found was there's a lot of problems in agriculture, and the ones that we could solve was the ones that happened in the soil. And the problems that were happening in the soil were the nutrients and how they're being delivered to the plants. And there's a lot of nutrient runoff issues. Phosphorus and nitrates are the big ones you can think of in particular. And what we realize is knowing microbes, knowing how they interact with plants, and knowing how they cycle nutrients, that we could use our training to target one of those really important problems. And so we focus on phosphorus. And for those of you that do or maybe don't know, the technology we developed actually focused on mobilizing phosphorus, taking phosphorus up and making sure that it could be delivered to the plant. The purpose of that was so anything that farmers delivered into the soil would be taken up by the plant and not just left as over time residual, and it can turn into pollution over time, agrochemical fertilizer.
So how do you go about finding and selecting and breeding that bacteria that accomplishes that thing? Like, it's cool, it's one thing to go like, wouldn't it be cool if we had bacteria that helped us do this? And then you have to go find and make the thing,
Yeah. Isn't that cool? And that's where, I think me trying one of everything, we're like, okay, let's just do it. So it's systematic is what you do. You think about, well, if you're going to have bacteria that are going to do this, maybe you need some bacteria. And so where do you get the bacteria? We did a lot of really cool things. We crowdsourced soils from all over the country and even all over the world, and had people send soils to us. And what we could do, and I'm great at this, is growing bacteria and growing fungi also, but this is a bacterial. We decided to work on bacteria for this particular project. So we could culture all the bacteria that we possibly could from all the soils that were brought in from all over the world. And we got kind of smart about it also. We thought, well, if there are soils in particular areas where petrochemicals are an issue, maybe we want to make sure we can nurture those because that would be the environment they're in. We ended up collecting soils from all sorts of different ecotypes, from forests, from deserts, from agriculture systems, everywhere we could, because we wanted to nurture as much diversity as we possibly could, and then try to select microbes that would work well for our particular target problem, if that makes sense. And so
Yeah.
collect the pool of microbes, and that's what we did. And then we decided, well, this is actually how we did it, and this is patented. So there's 3 patents on this particular technology, which is cool. So you can read all about it. But the thing that Matt Wallenstein and me, as co-founders of the company, and love Matt, I think he's a genius in a lot of ways, and he really inspired me. I love working with great people, and we had a lot of fun back then. And what we did is like, well, hey, we'd always like to try cool new stuff. We decided to treat microbes like a plant trait breeding program.
Okay.
And so that's exactly what we did, and it had never been done before, and it was very exciting. And so what Matt and I were really known for was microbial function. We knew what microbes did. We have a lot of papers together and even video publications where we show people how to assess functionality of microbes. Because you can assess who they are or what they are, but for us, it's important to know what's there, but it was more interesting to know what they're doing, and so they can be there, but if they're not doing anything, are they really that interesting? And the answer that we came up with was no. But we have to deliver function if we're going to be applied. And so how do you do that? Well, you focus on function, which was super cool. And I'll tell you, conceptually, I'll use a plant breeding example. I'll use tomatoes. If you want to cultivate some special tomato, typically in a plant breeding program, you would have the same cultivar, you would have 1,000 replicates, say 1,000 plants, and you want, say, the function or trait you're trying to select, those bigger tomatoes. You could grow all those tomato plants out, and you would ultimately select the seeds from the biggest tomatoes of those cultivars and then plant those. And then generation after generation, you could go through the same iteration and continue to pick the biggest tomatoes. And over time, you're going to pick or select a cultivar that grows bigger tomatoes within that particular species of tomato plant. We did the same thing for microbes. We selected all the microbes that we could cultivate from all those soil samples that I explained, and we tested them for the trait of phosphorus cycling. And we were able to do that. It's a little sophisticated, but it's just a methodology that we created where you could actually look at the function. Instead of a bigger tomato, we're looking at the function of microbes, and that's nutrient cycling phosphorus. And so generation after generation, we could grow up microbes and put them in a very selective environment, which would mimic an agriculture environment, which we thought was important, and test them for their ability to cycle phosphorus. And if we have thousands of replicates, which we did, we could pick the winning community and repropagate that 1,000 times, and then grow them up again, and then select the winner. And so the same type of process for microbes. And the interesting thing, and the thing I love about microbes, is instead of for plant trait selection, typically you have to wait for a whole plant generation, which can be months and months. For a microbial generation, it's days.
Yeah.
And so you can have a selection event every couple of days. And so you can have several iterations or hundreds of iterations of successive generations of selection in the course of months, which is fascinating. That's cool. So it's called directed selection. So it's not novel, it's artificial directed selection, because you are artificially selecting certain traits and propagating them into subsequent generations. So you can actually train nature to do some things for you at certain levels in a natural setting, but just through your intention of selecting function, if you can measure it. Super cool.
So basically what you started with was a pool of IMOs, and you brought the
diversity of nature.
Yeah, you brought that pool of IMOs, found the ones that were going to maybe do the function you were looking for, and then basically train them for that functionality, and picking the ones that were most successful over time at doing that specific function that you were looking for.
Absolutely. And I'll add one more layer. And this is really important for, that And that would be a nice fundamental research project. We're just looking at function. We can do that. Okay, we can train microbes, great. But they actually have to perform. And they have to perform in agriculture systems. And that was the target. And to do that, we had to make sure that we could also achieve efficacy. And efficacy is a really challenging thing to overcome, meaning environment selects cold, hot, pH, all these things determine not only plant growth, but they especially determine microbial growth. And so we created an environment that I was telling you about, a selective environment that we propagated these microbes in that we thought mimicked an environment that they would experience in agriculture systems. And so high osmotic pressure, a water system, high ion concentration, nutrient selection, or nutrient conditions. And so if we could plug them right into the environment, we thought that the microbes that couldn't survive in that environment would get weeded out. And so there was a double selection criteria: one, the functional selection, and two, the environmental selection. And so we could propagate microbes under both those selective pressures simultaneously. And it was a fascinating observation. We started off with over 10,000 microbes at the beginning of the selection process. And after about 100 generations, we ended up with 4 that could cycle phosphorus over 30 times greater than we saw any of them do in nature alone. And so it was a really fascinating way to train that function. And the ones that weeded out, we believe there was some intentional selection, because we would select 1 out of 1,000 different cells of or environments or communities to repropagate. So you're leaving out some microbes, but that environment selected out a lot of them. And so you could select a microbial community or consortia that had a high level of function that was very environmentally resistant or very efficacious for that environment you're selecting for. And that was the real magic of the technology. It was on the front end, well thought out. A little bit of luck.
And so kind of like the problem being solved is, if these microbes are making available the phosphorus that's been applied to whatever medium or soil, that allows the soil and the microbes to use what's there, rather than having it all run off, create algae blooms and other environmental impacts. So it allows the farmer to use less phosphorus because he's cycling more. And then it's also locking it in and storing it for use in the soil, rather than having it just leach out into the lagoon and kill everything.
The problem we were trying to solve is phosphorus in general in some soil types, in calcareous soils and alkaline systems, and in acidic systems. A lot of iron and aluminum is present in those soils. Well, phosphorus binds really well. And, calcium phosphate is a really intuitive example for growing in particular. The iron and aluminum happens also. It can build up for decades, which is interesting. So farmers are adding phosphorus to soils, and it's getting bound and not made available to the plant. And so that's a phenomenon that happens in most soils. And microbes can release that. And so the thing is phosphorus, total phosphorus, builds up in soils for decades in agriculture systems. It's not available to the plant, so you're wasting a lot of phosphorus. Up to 70% becomes unavailable immediately once it's added. But once all those ion exchange sites are saturated, the next season when farmers add phosphorus, it just flushes right through the system. And so it can create crazy pollution events or leaching events. We thought if we could add biology with those events, ultimately farmers could use less fertilizer, and the microbes could mine the total phosphorus and make it available to plants. And so there's a better balance. The other downside of having soils saturated with all those ions is it creates a very selective environment. And so the natural community from a decade or more ago that was in those soils has a very hard time surviving. And so it starts really diminishing the diversity, microbial diversity in those soils, just because of the agriculture practices. And there's 3 or 4 things that really do that. And fertilizer applications is one of them. And that's a real problem. And there's a lot of studies that show, decadal studies that show the diversity of microbes in soils in heavily conventionally farmed agriculture diminishes to a point where it's losing its natural function. And that conceptually turns those soils into an inert media like a rock wool where you have to continue to feed it nutrients just to support plant growth. That's no good. And so it's about balancing out the natural function of soils with microbial benefits in those cropping systems. That was the vision for the technology that we were trying to solve.
Great.
Yeah, that's really intense. I mean, a lot of microbial interactions and functions that are in our soils, we don't even really, we're just kind of learning about all that. There's so much that we don't know about all those interactions and dependencies. And like you said, once the generations of evolving microbes in that area are decimated, you're left with basically dry dirt.
Totally, it's a real problem, and so that was the point of the technology. And I'll tell you what my role is, and it's always been that way, regardless of a brand or what I've done. It's about promoting these natural technologies to help support plant growth. That's a really interesting, I think, value or mission or purpose that as a scientist and a business professional, I can continue to nurture. And although the technology I developed at the university was one of the first of its kind, it was the first of the kind that the cannabis industry had seen. That's pretty clear. There's some others out there and some others that are emerging that I've seen recently that are very, very cool and have a lot of promise. And so what interests me is progressing this area of farming and farming practices. It's really important for me.
Colin, I have a question for you that just came to mind. That I feel like it's been debated online a bit back and forth. So I'd love to get your thoughts. Basically, I think the question that a lot of people have, that from folks that are using microbial, or maybe they're thinking about it, the question is when I'm applying it, am I like, do I have to apply it every week, or do these actual colonies take like months and months to actually become a thing and actually be helping my plant? I think there's a lot of confusion as to like, why am I applying this stuff every week? But then I've also heard that these microbial colonies take like long stretches of time. So does it make sense to apply them for a plant that's only alive for like 3 months, and then I'm moving on from that soil in some situations? I think there's some confusion there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think overall, it depends on the microbial group you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think that what we see, and let's just talk about indoor growing, is there's different fungal applications to bacterial applications. Bacterial applications, there's either a vegetative or an active microbial or a dormant microbial formula, and we can talk about that. Either one, bacteria vegetate or become functional very quickly. And so all they have to do, if they're dormant, is engage with plant roots, and roots actually feed or chemically signal those spores. Most of the products I'm kind of referring to are dormant bacteria called endospores. They're bacillus, forms of bacillus genus in a lot of different species.
Okay.
You can relate that to a plant seed. Plants make seeds, and in outdoors, there's a seed bank in the soil that can last for decades. And that's why weeds come up every year. And that weed seed might be a year old, might be 10 years old, but when the conditions are right, it grows. Well, this group of bacteria does the same exact thing, which is fascinating. It's wonderful for some aspects of application because you can have those dormant bacteria in a bottle and they have indefinite shelf life,
Right.
which is amazing. And you can develop them with some different formulations that make them very compatible for any type of agriculture, irrigation management, fertigation practices, which is fascinating. I've seen some very cool technologies lately that have focused just on that, almost clean microbes, so to speak. And I just love what people are doing with this category right now. Once they engage with the roots, they will become vegetative within days. or there's already an active microbial community that's working. And so I think that what you see is the benefits. I've worked with a lot of different microbial products, and you'll inoculate and do very controlled side-by-sides, and you see the results from the plant growth. And so there's obviously some results there. Fungi typically take a little longer to infect, and arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi is a different group, but they also have a very similar mechanism. Most fungi create spores, which is just like a plant seed or an endospore for the bacteria, and it's a hard protein dormant state that will allow the fungi to persist in harm and unfavorable conditions for many years. And when the conditions are right, it will vegetate, or it will grow its hyphae, and it will, live in the soil. Arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, AM fungi, which we mostly see in this particular industry, infect plant roots. It's a symbiote, but it works by infecting the plant root. And so it goes from a spore stage, then it creates these little, just say, threads. It's called hyphae. And those hyphae will grow through the soil. They'll find a host, which would be a plant root, and it actually penetrates that root, grows in the root. I know I always like to use my little hand gesture, so I'm doing that, but it's actually growing inside the plant root, and it creates exchange sites where it actually does nutrient swapping. And so in that particular case, arbuscular mycorrhizae will extend into the soil and be able to scavenge or take up available nutrients, phosphorus in the case of arbuscular mycorrhizae, translocate that to the plant. So it's easier for the plant to grab any available phosphorus because it can reach beyond its own root zone. And in exchange, the plant feeds it carbon. In that particular case, those mycorrhizal fungi, arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, can take, it depends, but 10 days is not an uncommon time frame for it to vegetate, infect the cell, and start working.
Okay.
So it's still very applicable for annual crops, but you have to set expectations. I think it's a earlier stage type of application to allow the plants time to actually utilize the benefits.
Right.
It's absolutely positively a win in indoor and outdoor systems. It's been used in outdoor cropping across every crop for a very long time. And so there's added benefit. If you're outdoors, it can actually reduce, in some cases, in many cases, there's hundreds of publications on this particular type of usage or inoculant arbuscular mycorrhizae that help with climate stress or drought stress. And so it can help in a couple different ways. Saying that, the last piece of that, I get drawn out here when I start talking about the microbes. It's true conceptually. Once you get to a critical mass of microbes and they're doing their thing, that's what you want. You're always trying to achieve, as a grower, a critical mass of biology in the root zone. And so, and all recommended bottles are saying I use it from start to finish. In many cases, I think that I would support that, especially for the bacteria. But if you know the why, you can learn how to manage it. Once you have a critical mass, over time, you don't know how much of those bacteria are turning over because it's a microorganism. There could be some death. They're going to be growing in that rhizosphere too. But as a precision farmer, and this is precision agriculture, consistency is key. And if you have consistent operations, you're going to get consistent results, and you can manage what you can measure. And so if you have one inoculation at the very beginning of the growth season, are bacteria going to be there? Yeah, but it's very hard to manage. But if you can have some type of regime or consistency when you're inoculating, you have a lot of confidence that you know how many microbes are there across the growing season. And if you get good results, you can manage that practice. You can go less, you can go more, but one inoculation is very hard to manage. And the likelihood of that threshold of microbes being the same from the very beginning of the growing season to the very end is low. And so having some re-inoculations just gives you confidence that you're going to have that critical mass of the beneficial microbes that you want in that rhizosphere or root zone across the growing season.
Okay. Thank you so much for that answer. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's good, Colin. That was really good. And it kind of leads us into our next question. It's kind of a 2 or 3-parter. But as you mentioned, there are exchanges being done. A lot of the living soil community says that the root exudate exchanges between the roots and the microbes are an important function of the plant's feeding. And synthetic people, they have a chelated product or a automatically root available product, and that goes right into the plant's system. They say that once you start introducing synthetic solutions, that the function of the root exudate and the plant feeding from the microbe stops or halts. And then you're basically killing that process and relying only on the synthetic or chelated exchanges. But a lot of people, such as myself, use a synganic approach where we're using organic inputs, we're using microbes, and we're also using very low, like salt inputs, like nothing under or nothing over a 10 NPK. Is it possible to balance both of those systems, or is it really the science of one or the other? And can you kind of speak about those exchanges?
Yeah. I'll speak in generalities because you have to measure to know exactly what's going on. And what I would say is I think a balanced approach, there's in biology, there's no definitive. There's always some movement and a range of possibilities. All plants have evolved to exude carbon, the synthate, the photosynthesis from the air through their bodies and squirt them into the roots. They've evolved to do that since the beginning of time. The exchange in that natural system, and that's why the plants that have evolved and you see everywhere today are so successful, meaning success means they have continued to pass their genealogy from one generation to the next. And that's success in biology because they're able to nurture that. What that does, it actually stimulates microbial activity. Plants get carbon from the air. They need carbon. Carbon's the backbone of all life on Earth. It's the currency of life on Earth. Everything else that plants get, they get from the soil. If you think about it, water, nitrogen, phosphorus, everything, every nutrient, every macronutrient, every micronutrient, everything's in the soil. And so they've learned and evolved to nurture microbial activity to help them receive those nutrients. If they can squirt labile sugars, carbon, photosynthate, some organic acids from their photosynthate through their bodies to stimulate microbial activity in nature, microbes cycle those nutrients, as we were talking about, make them available, and then plants can draw them up because plants do a great job. I'm a microbiologist, and we used to have funny jokes about plants because plant people and microbiology people, soil people usually bantered a lot. And we would call plants charismatic carbon pumps that are great at sucking. And honestly, it's true because all they do is pump carbon from the air and then they suck from the ground. So all they do are sucking from both ends, carbon from the top, water from underneath. And everything that's in the water, the microbes will liberate the nutrients to make soluble, and we know that term. And so we have soluble nutrients in the water because microbes will liberate nutrients, put it in the water column, and once it's in there, the plants can draw that up. And so that's exactly how that works. And if there's more microbes there, they're doing more activity, they're liberating more nutrients, and plants have evolved to stimulate microbial activity by throwing sugars through the roots in there. And so it's the same thing it's conceptually the same thing as throwing molasses. Somewhere a lot of people used to use molasses to stimulate microbial activity. That's a very specific form of sugar or carbon substrate that can grow microbes. Plants have a very diverse plan for that. The idea that synthetics halt that evolutionary process is, I don't believe that's 100% true. It might stifle a little bit. Plants allocate their resources based on their necessity. And so there's a good study. I'll talk about it more so from my expertise from a microbial perspective. We talked about AM fungi or bacillus mycorrhizal fungi. Well, it's interesting, and there's some great work out there that shows that the more phosphorus that's in the system, the lower infection rate, the lower success of the infection rate those mycorrhizae have of infecting the plant. And part of that's true because I think the plant invites that infection when they're trying to get more phosphorus because they sense a limitation, but they don't need to have that infection, which, there's always a trade-off because they're giving something for that when there's plenty of phosphorus. And so it turns out the infection rates are increasingly less successful for bacillus mycorrhizae with higher levels of phosphorus. I believe the same concept would be true. There's a threshold where probably synthate decreases slightly because the plants are busy allocating those resources, taking up nitrogen and the other nutrients in the soil. But there would not be a complete shutdown of photosynthate. And we've done a lot of work ourselves where it wasn't a natural system, it was a rock wool system or a soilless media system where we're measuring synthate. And there's a lot of great studies where you can actually feed plants nutrients and grow them and measure and collect synthate from them. And so to think that that shuts down is probably not completely accurate.
That's good that you kind of laid that out for folks, because that seems to be a huge debate in our community. And coming from someone who's actually studied the science, it has a little more weight than bro science. You know what I mean? So we appreciate your insight, and because it's kind of a controversial subject in our community, really.
Yeah, totally. I would say also that there's levels to this. It's always biology is always on a threshold, and so there's never just a yes and no. It's a threshold. Even us as humans, we can take a certain amount of cold before we shut down. We can take a certain amount of heat before we shut down. Everything has this range of function, pH or anything else. Plants can exist within a range of pH before it becomes a huge problem. So think of anything in thinking of things in terms of ranges is, I think, a lot more appropriate for any kind of biological system, even indoor growing, than just a yes or no, because you can talk about those thresholds and talk about the meaning of it. The other piece of that is what I would I think is legit to think if you're feeding. There's a lot of practices now where there's heavy salt, or hydroponics. A lot of people love their salts, and a lot of practices around feeding hypochlorous acid or maybe some other disinfectant to the plant all the time, which I think is something I wouldn't do. I just don't think plants like to drink bleach personally, but some practices are there. But if those practices are being if that's being practiced regularly, what you're going to find is probably a very small microbial population in the rhizosphere. If you're not inoculating regularly, you haven't inoculated and you're a pure salt grower, I'm not so sure how beneficial those exudates are going to be. I think the exudates are probably still happening in those systems. Plants are exuding, but what are they exuding to? I mean, the purpose evolutionarily is exuding to a microbial community to grow a bigger mass of microbes to help cycle nutrients. And so it's attacking that system from a couple of different angles. So even if they're exuding, I wouldn't know what they would be doing. But it's I personally think there's a lot of value in having beneficial microbes, because if there's a food source, biology has a way of finding it, and especially microbiology, and especially bad microbiology. And so if you don't have good microbes, nurturing good microbes in your system, you might be nurturing bad ones because you can't control. You cannot control everything in nature, or you can't control every biological aspect anywhere. I mean, we're all breathing in thousands of spores right now. I guarantee it, because they're just in the air. That's just the way we are. Our immune system handles it. So thinking about balancing out what you can control and you can't control with an approach of using like beneficial microbes, I think is compelling for that reason alone. I'm kind of biased, but yeah.
Yeah.
I also, sorry, Q, I got one more.
It's no worries, man.
While we're still on this subject of cycling and stuff, a lot of people in indoor situations do pretty aggressive drybacks. I know there's a certain amount of moisture that needs to be present for these living systems to be able to work efficiently. Can you talk a little bit about the dryback and what might be at stake as far as losing your microbial populations?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think the biggest question to kind of, or the biggest topic to think about is scale here. Like, I worked in desert systems for a decade, and you'd be holding sand that was hot to touch, like it actually almost burned your hand, like crap. And you would think that it was a dry back system, that there's nothing in there, but you could actually extract water from that if you baked it appropriately and actually took a soil moisture content analysis. And so from a microbial perspective, it's a very different world than from our perspective, or even from a plant's perspective. And so a soil moisture content could be a couple of ions or molecules, which would be sufficient to maintain a certain level of life. And I'm not so sure that these systems ever dry back to the point where they would experience huge knockoff. But again, there's a threshold. Do I think that if there's a wetting event and a drying event and a wetting event and a drying event, that microbial density or populations, overall mass, would follow that somewhat? Probably. I think that's intuitive. But to think it would knock it all the way out, I don't think is likely.
So would you say SIP systems and self-irrigating pots are more advantageous and more friendly to microbial growth than, say, something like a cocoa that dries out and then gets re-wetted and then dries out?
Listen, I'll address that from like a natural perspective. I mean, those drying systems happen in nature,
Right.
and the microbes haven't gone anywhere. And so I don't have a strong opinion about that. I think the practices like that, JR, are better suited for the grower to make up their mind what they're comfortable with cultivating. I think the microbe life, and it's the manufacturer's jobs in general, and scientists' jobs and inventors' jobs to find the microbes that work best, or in this particular case, the microbes that work best for those systems. And so most of the microbes that you'll find, I think more than not, in what's available for cultivating, for purchase for cultivating, whatever you want to use, have a level of resilience that work really well. I'm speaking generally. Would the microbes from outside, if I just brought in a bunch of microbes, do really well in a controlled environment that we're talking about? No, I think most of them would die because they're not used to that new environment. But the microbes that we use have been tested for their ability to kind of persist in this world, in this kind of controlled growing system world.
I don't know if this is kind of the same question, but a different spin, and or also outside of the scope of the conversation. But I guess on that note, picking up off of JR's topic, I love Blue Mott's watering systems. I use it in my backyard to water my plants. Super helpful and outside when it gets really hot and all this kind of stuff. I don't have to worry about having to be out there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon watering my plants or whatever. But I've heard and seen conversations lately about, hey, maybe a constantly wet soil is not the right thing. Actually, maybe it was Jeremy from Build a Soil that was saying this in a video, now that I think about it. And he was basically saying, like, maybe we do need a little bit of that dry back period. Do you have any thoughts on that? Again, if you don't, all good. I just was curious.
I think it just depends. I think some plants, honestly, if we're talking about plants, would like that better than others.
Yeah.
And, some would respond better. So it just ultimately depends. They say the environment selects. If you look at the equator, start the equator and move your way north or south, Plant diversity differs greatly because of the environment, and different plants like different things. It's what it comes down to. Microbes are the same way. They have a lot of different parameters that they select for. So you're going to find a lot of people that have great success with that system. And then you're going to find these strains that, or if you did a side by side, it'd be interesting to understand, oh, wow, well, it works here, but the plants love this. I think the natural cycles of a little drying and wetting makes sense to me. But I'm not so sure that I don't know what the data would show. And like I said, I would say some probably would like it a lot better, and some do just fine in either systems.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate your insights. This is fun.
Yeah.
Well, let's say, JR, I think we were going to shift gears a little bit and talk about kind of the business side of things. Is that right?
Yeah. We kind of wanted to make that transition from the science academia process to actually getting out there and getting a product to market. So once you had the microbes in a condition ready for market, what made you actually decide to make that jump to market? Or were you kind of, with your business intuitiveness from your past experience, had that kind of in mind the whole time?
The goal was to go to market. We didn't know where we were going to go, and we didn't know a lot of what we didn't even know. And so, businesses are very different. And I guess to glean, agriculture business has its own unique characteristics that you can be a general business guy and know nothing about the agriculture business. And to be fair, you can be a general business guy or an agriculture business guy and know absolutely positively nothing about the cannabis industry. And you might never ever have the ability to learn about the cannabis industry because it's unique. And so how we approached it is we decided that we would go out just like good researchers and start talking to people and just collecting that information. Talk to your customers, and that's 1000% what I would still do today. You have to understand what your customer wants, what growers want. Are you making something that matters to them?
Right.
Will it bring them value? And what I learned early on is that, most startups and entrepreneurs, they fall in love with their ideas so much that they're too scared to actually ask someone else what they think. And so what I loved about our process is we were just unbiasedly collecting data, go out, talk to 100 people, kind of tell them about what we were doing and ask if it would bring them value and see where it might live in a market. And so I went out and talked to corn farmers and to garlic farmers and to just everywhere. And at one point, about halfway through this process, someone was asking me, well, does it work on cannabis? And we were here in Colorado. And the whole time I had blinders on. I was like, man, my idea for this technology was I wanted to deliver it to developing countries. And so it could help people that didn't have the infrastructure or the economics to grow food as well as they could to grow food.
Wow.
That's what I wanted to do with it. And then I learned that was an impact, a huge impact, but that wasn't necessarily a business. So you had to figure out how to create a sustainable business to make a bigger impact. And so I was like, okay, great. So let's figure out how to create a business. And then as this business starts to get to a certain threshold, you could bridge out and actually maybe realize some of your bigger dreams or visions for the technology itself. And so it was a very, just an idealist as a scientist and as an inventor, but I had to really put on the business suit part of this journey and understand how to create a business. And I think the first thing, and today it still holds true, and you'll know someone if you're listening out there, this will never serve you poorly. It means it always serves you well. If you'll go out and talk to your customers and ask what they think, they will give you the keys to the kingdom and lead you exactly where you need to. You might not want to hear the answer, but you will get the truth. And what I think is, it's our job, if we're going to deliver something, to make sure that we understand that it's meaningful and it's valuable. And I'd rather be living in reality because I can manage reality instead of just living in my own head thinking, oh man, we're going to make something that changes the world. I'm kind of all over the place, but most businesses fail and entrepreneurs fail because they're the only people that love their idea. And they go so far down this road promoting this idea or this product that they don't even have any validation on.
Right.
And so we barely had a product, and we went out and made sure we could get market validation to make sure it was something worth pursuing. And so
Right.
that's what we did. And the idea is if you don't know something, but you're at least smart enough to pick a group of people that know something about a topic more than you, go find them, engage them, talk to them, and you'll start incorporating your conscious into their collective conscious. And so you can calibrate your perspective of reality with what probably is a better perspective of reality. And so we're able to talk to a lot of folks, ultimately started working with cannabis people, asking them what they thought about the technology, phosphorus cycling, natural microbial bloom stimulant ideas, and getting it in the hands of growers and realizing that it was creating a new category that was bringing growers a lot of value. And so we didn't know what we were going to do with it. We went out and talked to a lot of people and realized that this is what we wanted to do with it. You know, it's something that would grow all plants, but as a young company, you have to focus and you actually have to laser focus to be successful. And I'm really happy that we were able to laser focus and the cannabis industry accepted this technology. Just speaking about the technology as a young scientist, it allowed the opportunity to learn with customers and to grow with customers. It was the most amazing experience in a fascinating and wonderful industry. So it was, you know, it's changed my life. You know, everything I do is going to be focused on this industry, as far as I can tell, forever, because I'm in love with the people of it in this industry, and I've just had so much fun. I've been given so much. I want to continue to figure out where I can give back.
I was very stoked to be in, you know, kind of in the beginning of all, you know, of that whole journey. We've been friends for a long time, and I've always appreciated your generosity. I've always been appreciative of your willingness to learn, you know, from us, you know, on boots on the ground kind of guys. And it's been it's really shaped the way that I grow. And it's actually a huge part of why I am as successful as I am as a grower. Was because of my relationships with you and Scotty with Recharge in the beginning, that was teaching me about all of this stuff, you know, way before there was a lot of, you know, information out there. I mean, back in the day, if you went in to look for microbes, there were maybe 4 or 5 products available. You know, there wasn't a lot of microbial products designed for our industry, at least not on the shelves from a brick and mortar situation. And so I thought it was very valuable to be able to get in at the beginning and kind of shape my style of growing. And I appreciate that a lot, Colin.
Listen, I appreciate the support too. I remember the first time we ever met, and I remember exactly where I was sitting. And we've moved a lot across the years. But I was working out of this little transmission shop, 1,200 square foot. Finally moved out of my house and had the first official place outside of home that was an office, and you know, painted it up and making microbes in the back. And 4 of us were crammed in this little space that they used to do rebuild transmissions in. So it's just what you do is you get going. And I just remember the first time I saw your channel, the first time we had a conversation, and we couldn't have done it without you. I mean, those were the interactions that helped me understand how to get better, how to, you know, about everything. So it's about working with great people and learning with great people. Life is a learning experience, man. The journey is 99% of everything we do. And it's been actually a really fun journey with you, JR.
Been a lot of fun. A lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is, you know, you invested in time in building those relationships and listening and appreciating what your customer needs and delivering value to them. I really appreciated those notes. I also wanted to ask about when did the how early on did the Mammoth brand become a thing? Because, you know, at least when I was introduced to you guys, which was like 2018-ish, by then the logo, the iconic like kind of branding was a thing. And to me, I also appreciated how smart that all these things were intertwined, right? Like there was you sharing, just like you've been doing for the last hour, sharing such great information with the community, which itself is investing in the community, and that comes back to you eventually in some ways. But then you also have this brand, and it becomes like a cool thing that people want to have a big, you know, sticker on their grow or whatever it is. How early did that come into it? Because it seems like that took a keen appreciation as well.
Yeah, it did from the very beginning. Listen, I left the university in March 16, 2015 with nothing, with a little investment money. I didn't have a place to do business. I couldn't work at the university anymore because I was a for-profit and I was using technology, had patented the technology, licensed it from the university because it's officially university technology, and I'm the inventor of that patent. Me and my co-founder, one of my co-founders, Matt Wallenstein. So we didn't have anything. But in that very short period of time, my job, I'm the one that I was most suited to kind of start this endeavor. My co-founders stay at the university because that's kind of what they're poised to do, is scale up production, scale up commercialization, scale up a team, package everything, go to market, and start figuring out how to make money, how to exchange with customers. And we were in Colorado, so we focused on Colorado because we were right here, and accomplished all that. Worked with some people. We landed on this really cool brand. I have a partner that helps me design some stuff that's amazing. And one of the early people that we were working with, Mammoth wasn't the first name. I came to the table with Mammoth. I'd heard it and I was like, that's awesome. This is perfect. It's just a perfect brand. And I got outvoted by the rest of the team. They're like, no, we don't want to do this because everyone was very scientific. We want to do something more literal, and they didn't get it. And they wanted to do Elevate. And that's a true story. And so we made labels for Elevate and blah, blah, blah. And I'm doing all this. I'm doing all the work. You know, everyone just has an idea. Then Colin, you know,
you got to make
jumps
it happen.
through the flaming hoops. Yeah. And at the very last second of the last hour, and then I have these labels and everything was hard to do. Even my packaging people, they were, you know, when you're a brand new company, big packaging companies, they don't want to give you the time of day. You know, you're like an afterthought. So you're really working for any time with them to get bottles and closures and boxes and all that stuff. It turned out that there was a conflict. Elevate was a conflict. I was pretty irritated about it. I was like, it wasn't my job to research that, but it didn't get researched well. And I was just like, screw it, Mammoth wins. Get out of my way, we're going. And so, and the truth is, life happens in some weird ways. Mammoth is a perfect brand because of its characteristics. I'll share something that I think about as far as rules of branding. Any kind of brand that I think is, I'm just thinking in general, you know, why Mammoth works or why the brands work. It gives an immediate impression. And so if there's a word that gives you an immediate impression, all of a sudden it could represent a good brand because it gives you something. I always thought Mammoth big. I always thought Mammoth was funny because Mammoth microbes is what I love because microbes are microscopic, but Mammoth is huge. And so I thought that was a funny play on words. But it's also 1 to 2 syllables, so it's easy to say. So it gives us immediate impression, 1 to 2 syllables. And another thing is, and this is the third rule, does it look good on a hat? And so if for everyone out there, if you can check those 3 boxes, you might have something. You want something that emulates or gives a message that your company wants to be. If they're a brand, it needs to be easy to say, 1 to 2 syllables, and it should look good on some clothing. If you can put all those things together, you might be under a great brand. And so it's just as simple as that. There's a lot of wonderful brands out there, and I really like branding. And I'm working, and I'm interested in helping a lot of people out there understand how to navigate and become successful entrepreneurs and create great companies. It's really important to me. It's one of my passions right now is to create great companies.
So when you were Sorry, Jay.
Go ahead, Sam.
I was going to
Go
say,
ahead.
so when you were creating this great company of yours and getting it off the ground, what kind of did you guys like raise some money? Was it like friends of and family funding? Like, you don't have to tell us like total dollar amounts, but just curious,
Yeah.
like, what did it take to get something like that off the ground?
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's a privately held company. It's investor backed. It's serious investors like venture
Right.
capital investors,
Yeah.
and so that was actually a choice that we made. That was probably they learn a lot through the experiences of making choices and going through these. We
Yeah.
went through a lot of business incubators, and they were all pushing venture capital, venture capital. You'll hear that everywhere. And what I'll say about that, I didn't think about it as a time. I treated this as something that was magical and beautiful. And we had this technology from an idea, and we were going to create a lot of value and help growers. And so that was my motivation. And I got a lot of inherent fulfillment out of just doing that. And you mentioned it. I was out talking about microbes to everybody, one person at a time, at talks,
Right.
conferences around the world. I was just sharing education around microbes and how you might be able to use them to help your plants grow better. Um, what I'll tell you is a couple things that I have business coaches that I've had for years, different ones over time. As soon as you decide to take money, you've chosen a fork in the road that you can never backtrack on.
Yeah.
Be clear. It's not yours as soon as you do that. And as much as there's a lot of great will and everything else at the very beginning, I'm just saying conceptually, understand that. You have to understand that people out there, if you're as a young entrepreneur, don't think anything other than that. You have chosen a trajectory for that company.
Yeah.
You have made that choice. And that choice ultimately is going to have to end in an exit because investors exit companies. Their job is to grow a company and sell that thing. And so that's the purpose of that. If you want a long-term family business, you better figure out a different pathway than taking people's money, investor money. You can get loans and do these different things. There's a lot of creative ways to do that, but that's a really important detail. The other really important detail is once you invite someone else into your family, you've invited everything that comes with them. And I used to think this for a long time. Well, let's just make sure we have the right investors. And I have a coach that I work with now, and I said that again recently. Just for some reason, I was talking through a conceptual problem with him, and he was like, "Colin, get it through your thick skull. That person doesn't exist. That person doesn't exist, no matter how good they are. As soon as you invite someone, especially at a young stage of your company, into your family, into your home, your company, they will forever impose their will. Not that you can't impose it back, but it creates a different dynamic. And I think that's a very important thing that I didn't hear early on when I started this. And if at least you're making an informed choice. And so there's
Right.
a lot of ways to grow a company to create enough value. Maybe you need to do that at some point, but there's a lot of consequences to the choices you make at a young company, and make very, very sure you understand those consequences and implications because they stay with you forever.
Right.
And forever is a long time.
I appreciate that. I've worked for many venture-backed startups, and
Yeah.
as an employee. And I'll add the other thing I'll add on to that too is like everything that Colin said is true for you as an employee as well. Where the small startups, they might seem like it's a family and everyone loves each other, and you do often have that for a period of time, but that eventually ends because there's changes that occur, and I've been on the receiving end of those changes. And it's hard to get through that, but it is just the reality of the business. You know what I mean? So I appreciate what you were saying there because it definitely resonated with me.
Yeah, Sam, thank you so much. And that's a really important detail too. As an employee, you're coming into a team, know what the ownership structure is
Right.
because that's important for you. If you're supporting your family and there's this structure that, know what it is. Who owns this thing? Have you ever asked your business who's the owner? And if they can't tell you, maybe you need to find out because weirdness happens.
Totally.
Yeah, I would say that one thing about financing is a lot of people are in a situation, especially in our industry, where they maybe don't have access to proper banking, or their attorneys can't represent them because they're a cannabis related uh, business. And so, with you guys being in kind of the picks and shovels type of aspect of the industry, were you able to get better financing and legal representation to where maybe other folks in the industry may not?
I would say that if you're not touching a plant, you have better access in general. It's not without its pitfalls. I mean, everyone's jumped through some hurdles in this industry.
Right.
There's investor groups that have invested in plant touching companies as well, JR. You know, I think in general, um, there's a lot going on. I don't know if you've watched the news and all the publicly traded companies also that were venture backed and then they went public. There's just so much distress that's happening right now within.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Sorry about that. We had some technical difficulties where my computer just decided to lock up in the middle of our last question there. So sorry about that. But we're going to try to get back on track. We have our last few questions that we're going to talk through with Colin. We've been super fortunate to have his time today. So let's see, JR, did we have our last handful of questions or so?
Yeah. We're just kind of wrapping up the business talk. And one of the interesting things I wanted to talk about to you, Colin, specifically about starting Growcentia, was that originally the landscape was very much brick and mortar when you started the company. And now over time, that kind of brick and mortar model is shrinking like a lot. And so now the online model is exploding more and more every day. And the dealer direct model for these larger farms and for these other businesses are obviously a very big thing that's happening. So, as someone who kind of entered into that brick and mortar, no distribution, basically relationships with these shops, how have you been able to kind of maneuver that? And what would you recommend for businesses out there that are in that exact same position as well?
Yeah, it's a tricky question because things move so quickly, don't they? In 2020 and 2019, the market was very strong. Into 2021, was very strong for a couple of different reasons. Probably exaggerated for how strong it was, but then because it was at such a peak that it fell into quite a low spot that's continued to be low for some time for people. And that's put a lot of stress on the channels, on the existing channels. And what I would say in general is you have to figure out how to diversify. And it's simple. Understand who your customers are and understand how to get to them. And that's it. And that's not, there's no one easy way to do that. But it's about understanding, you know, those retail stores that are going to be there, they're not going anywhere. You know, I've been in the market talking to a lot of wonderful retail partners and they still have a lot of great business. And you know, I do believe the market's coming back up. Interestingly enough, it's about time, and so it's going to start leveling out. Markets come up and they go down. That's just what they do. What most people don't understand is how if for cannabis is how quickly that happens. You know, for other industries, it just moves at such a slow rate, but for here, it's just it's too quick for people to manage. And so managing your business with that in mind will be very helpful for you and it will serve you well because this market is going to go up and down. It's just going to. And so structure your business accordingly. And if you understand what to expect along that curve on the good times and the bad times and how to get to your customers, across those different cycles, you will be successful. And that's all there is to it. And so you have to get creative. You have to put new strategies into effect. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the same thing we've talked about. Why don't you have a relationship with your customer and keep that relationship? And if you have the right solutions that bring value to your customers, you will continue to have a thriving business. If you're interested in just not engaging with the market, not understanding your customers, you're going to have a hard time getting to them. And it's going to shake out the companies that do not understand this industry and how to navigate this industry. And I think that's a pretty simple, it's a lot easier said than done. I'll promise you that. But that's what it comes down to, is know your customer, have a relationship with them, and keep them close. JR, you and I had a really wonderful conversation about that not that long ago. You can have a customer base and keep them forever. That's what many industries are built on, especially this one, relationships. And if you have what your customers need, they will buy from you. People don't buy products, they buy from people. And if there's a lot of different competitive solutions out there and you have a relationship, they will buy from you. And so what I would say is I've talked to a lot of people in this industry, and I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of people that are experiencing pain. A lot of them don't understand these lessons. Business guys that are, smart as the day is long, that can tell you everything about the car industry or whatever other industry that they have had experience with, but they don't have one example of how to be successful in this industry because they don't understand how to be successful in this industry. So they don't understand the difference between transactional business and a relationship-based business. And you have to structure a relationship-based business and be very flexible around how to get products to your customers and understand that there is going to be a market that's doing this through all of that. That's the only things that you really need to put together. All of it's very, very challenging.
And I would say that the cannabis industry, especially in the cannabis community as a whole, word gets around really fast, and your reputation can be destroyed very quickly. And so if you're not constantly managing these relationships in a meaningful way, word gets around. And we come from kind of a secretive, distrusting background anyways, as far as outsiders coming in. And so I think it's really smart for guys, like you said, to listen to their customers and be sure you value, like you said, the relationship, because the transactional turn and burn is only going to get you so far. If you want longevity in this industry, it's about building a brand. It's about building relationships and people who are stoked for your product.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty good, interesting business model for those of you out there that want to be successful in this industry. Jared just gave you the roadmap. you can put these in your values and in your culture, right? And in your core values and your culture. These are the things that you have to have. And I'll promise you that a lot of these publicly traded companies and big business companies and venture-backed companies that are coming in, it's not about that. It's about transaction. Ultimately, a company is people, and that's all it comes down to. And once you don't have people, you do not have a company. And a great company is a group of great people that have a common vision. And so if you can align those things, just for the bigger picture, if you can align those things in any industry, you'll be successful. And if you understand your customers and the industry you're in, and you can align a vision with great people, you're unstoppable. It sounds pretty simple. It's just not easy.
Back to the branding thing a little bit too. I would say one of the things that really stood out for me as first impressions with Mammoth Microbes was the quality of the things you represented and you were handing out. The hats, you go to shows, you get some really cheesy hats. You guys obviously took the time to spend money on really nice quality things. And I also thought it was cool that you were coming up with new items for people to get stoked about. Like I never did get one of those North Face backpacks that I saw people with. And I got to tell you, I was highly jealous, even though I got some hats that other dudes didn't get.
All right, all you brands out there, all you entrepreneurs, listen,
Right.
people like stuff. So, but I don't want to speak for any, I don't want to speak for any one company. I want to speak conceptually, the bigger picture here. As a company, if you're trying to create merchandise, I think a cool rule is to, would you wear it? Would you
Exactly.
wear it? I would never make anything that I wouldn't be proud to wear. I'm not trying to make a uniform that I have to wear to work. I'm trying to make something that I want to wear when I'm not at work,
Right.
And if you can kind of be like, oh, cool. I remember, I think that you were the one that told me this, JR. I made a shirt once and I loved it because it was soft and it felt good or whatever. And you're like, man, that's my favorite shirt, Colin. I like to sleep in it every night. I remember he told me that a long time ago. And I just want to tell you this conceptually. If your customers are wearing your shirts with your brand to bed, guess what's on their mind? Your brand. And so if you talk about the magic of branding, I'll just tell you, it's about being in your customer's mind when they don't even know that you're in their mind because they're wearing, your merch to bed. And that's the example. I'll never forget when you told me that, JR, because I was like, it's true. That's why I love, thinking about making stuff that supports the business the way I do, because it's the best, and you can, as an owner or a co-founder, you can drive your team crazy because, if it's not the right pin, you're like, this is shit. We want the best. And so you get obsessive with the best, but not to go in there. It's such a fun thing for me. I just absolutely love it. It means a lot. And if you can't make something that's awesome, wow. And someone told me something once. I was having a hard time in my life and I was giving a scientific talk and I wasn't prepared and I was tired and I did a very bad job. And it was embarrassing for me. And my mentor at the time, my scientific inventor, or my science mentor, and my boss, he was like, Colin, and he was my coach. And so, coaches usually tell you the hard lesson. They're like, dude, sometimes it's better to do nothing than to do something that's not good. And if you think about it, how many times have you gotten something that you're just like, but that costs that company money?
Exactly.
But was it good? Maybe the company should have just done nothing and instead bought you a water with a sticker on it and said, hey, you thirsty? Here's, I would say create an experience. If you want to be successful with customers and creating relationships, there's so many things I've learned across this course of 7 years that I work with a lot of people. I have people from all over calling me. Recently, interestingly enough, this happened the other day, and they would call out of the blue. It's like, hey, what's going on? This is no names here. Like, hey, remember 5 years ago when you said whatever? And you just go around and you try to lift people up in this world. It's what you try to do. I think that's being of service is a really important thing. Learning is the next important thing to serving because it helps you serve, and being of service comes back around. And I was talking to a guy just the other day. He's like, you told me this, and he was kind of a competitor at the time. And I was trying to lift him up and encourage him and say, hey, you guys can do it. If you need anything, let me know. And he got a tear. He almost got teary-eyed. He's like, that changed my life. It changed the way I thought about building this business, and every person I got in front of, I held your words close to me, and it helped me lift my business up, and it helped me train my team. And so, success is about people and about being of service to the people around you. So I think that's a really interesting quality just in every area of life, including business.
Well, JR, I think, and Colin, I think we should pretty much end it on that note. That's a good note to end on. We've been going for about an hour and a half today. We really appreciate your time, Colin. We'll have to bring you back again sometime and chat some more. You have so much knowledge that you can share and so much experience that you can share. It's really awesome and a privilege to get to hear from you.
Hey, I thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast. I'm out there learning voraciously, and I might have some cool things to share with you in a
Totally.
follow-up sometime. So I'd love to come back sometime.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
JR, let's see. Do you have any last things that we should shout out before we have Colin do his shout outs?
Yeah, just kind of let us know what's up next for Colin Bell. Where will we find Dr. Bell?
Listen, I'm out in the field a lot. I'm I'm looking for the next thing that's going to really excite me is honestly where I am in my life. I'm looking for companies that are growing, that need some advice, that need some service, that are innovating, and that are doing amazing things. I'm in this game because of innovations that help growers. And if there's companies that are innovative, that are helping growers, I'm attracted to you. And so anything I can do to help innovations and pushing this particular segment in particular, microbes and natural solutions into cultivating, I'm in. And it doesn't matter, and nothing else really matters. I think that's why I started the company that I started, and I'll continue to work serendipitously with everyone in this industry, in this community, to help motivate and progress the industry towards getting better and better, however I can.
Awesome. Do you have like a website or an Instagram, or a place I can send a carrier pigeon? Like, how can I keep in touch?
Yeah. So for me, Instagram's Colin W. Bell, ColinWbell, and you'll see it. It's the real Dr. Colin. There's a lot of imposters out there, but if you read the real Dr. Colin, you'll see it's me. And you can always hit me up there.
That's funny. You're not joking, actually. There are a lot of Nigerian spam accounts that I've had to delete on CannaBuzz that use your pictures for some reason.
Yeah,
You're just like the weed scientist guy.
Yeah. There's a lot of them.
Yeah,
that way.
I know.
I was going to make a joke. This face looks like a very trustable drug dealer.
Yeah, exactly. That's so funny. That's so funny. Well, we had a blast today. If you had a great time, please make sure to hit up Colin's website or follow him on Instagram. Make sure to support TikiMadMan. Again, we appreciate his support. He helped make this show possible and other adventures that we've been on in the past. So make sure to go over to tikiseeds.com. He's got some deals over there, and TikiMadMan.com. And then, of course, shout out to our CannaBuzz supporters. We had many of them on the live stream today. We had Colin and Gina and Crazy Pop Mom and so many others. So shout out to you all. If you want to join the crew, go over to CannaBuzz.app or search CannaBuzz in the app stores. Colin, I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday and a great rest of your upcoming week. Holy crap, it's February, and I hope you have a kick-ass 2023, man.
Awesome. Back at you. Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you so much, JR. It's been awesome, everyone.
Thanks for coming on, Colin. We really appreciate it.
Peace. Growers love.
Growers love.